Andrew Probyn.
Mr Albanese, thanks for your speech. Andrew Probyn from the ABC. Like my dear fellow disciple Phil Curry, I'm going to bang on the resurrection stone. Finding 37 said that Labor's climate change policy won the party votes among young and affluent older voters in urban areas. If I could venture an interpretation, does this suggest that Labor was more attractive to people who are perhaps less exposed to household bills or care less? And if you agree with that interpretation, gents, shout out. If Labor does pursue an ambitious climate change policy, do you pledge here to spell out exactly what the cost of those policies will be to Middle Australia, who clearly were a bit scared by your climate change policy, according to this review?
Well, the thing about climate change, Andrew, is that it won't have an impact just based upon wealth or based upon where people live. It's having an impact now. Go out and actually talk to some of our farmers who've spoken to me about the impact. People who aren't Labor's natural allies, speak to the NFF and what they're saying about climate change. We had an announcement yesterday with, I think they had 5 ministers to sort of try and cover up for the debacle that happened last time, with the Libs and the Nats announcing drought policy on the same time on different channels. Not one of them mentioned climate change. Not one. That's unacceptable. So we'll have strong climate change policy. I think that that's not something that you can pragmatically say, oh, we won't bother with that, because it's a challenge. And whether you're Pope Francis or the British Conservatives or the New Zealand government, yesterday in the Parliament passed, I'm not sure of all of the detail, but passed strong legislation where one person in the whole Parliament voted against it. Margaret Thatcher was one of the first world leaders who spoke about climate change. This shouldn't be a divisive issue. This should be something that the entire Parliament is working towards, as is happening in other parts of the world. I don't think that my son, and hopefully grandkids to come, not for very quickly, I hope, should be subject to policy decisions made by Craig Kelly. It's as simple as that.
Joel Fitzgibbon said this morning that he'd recently reached out to the Prime Minister to see if there was an appetite to getting a bipartisan agreement on climate change and energy policy. Did you condone that, and do you agree with his view that there needs to be that bipartisanship now?
I've said consistently that across the board we have conflict fatigue, and wherever possible we should get agreement. I don't think climate change should be a divisive issue. Have a look at Boris Johnson's commitments in the United Kingdom that he's campaigning for as Prime Minister. I mean, if you go to an international conference, you think you're in a different world. I've been to 2 UN framework conventions on climate change. You have big business. Here you have BHP and big business, banks, a range of people saying there needs to be action taken on climate change. The response of the government is to threaten those businesses and somehow to say they'll make it illegal for someone to exercise their democratic right to actually say, oh, well, I think it's bad that this project be financed because it's going to have a negative impact on the economy. We sometimes, I don't think in this country, see just how far off the mainstream the Abbott forces and the mob, who are not just climate change sceptics but they're market sceptics as well, have dragged the political debate in this country. And I'm not going to be dragged with it.